Hey everybody, we're going to be working on a JavaScript problem today that's going to be focused on strings and string manipulation and all the different really cool things that we can do with strings in JavaScript. This is really just going to be the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully it's a really good introduction for you into being able to do string manipulation in JavaScript. We're going to be working in Code Wars today. And one of the things that I want to point out to everyone is that I'm not going to be focused on our typical problem-solving framework that we normally ask everybody to really work through and to think about when you're doing problems like this. So that idea of reading through the instructions in detail and identifying your inputs and your outputs and writing your pseudocode, etc. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to do those things today. I'm going to just really focus in on walking through the code and talking a lot about the string manipulation, the string attributes, the different kinds of functionality that we have in JavaScript to deal with strings. So let's take a look here at our problem here. First, it says move the first letter of each word to the end of it, then add a Y to the end of the word. Leave punctuation marks untouched. So what we're doing here is we are reproducing Pig Latin, right? So we can see in our example, Pig Latin is cool. We want it to say something like igpe atenle ca ool k, right? So, okay, so this should be pretty interesting. It's a great example of having to really do a lot of stuff with strings in a function. So first, let's start putting in some of our code. So the first thing that occurs to me that I want to do is I want to take this sentence that I'm being given, this string that I'm being given, and I want to break it into pieces. You may look at these sentences like this and think of these in terms of words, like I want to pluck the words out of there, which is fair. But I'd rather use a more generic term because the things that I'm pulling out might not always be words. They might be like we have here an exclamation mark like that, or it might be some other kinds of characters, or it might be like a phone number. I wouldn't necessarily consider that a word per se. A more generic term to use is token. So I'm going to go with the word token here. So I'm going to create a new, not a const, a new constant variable that I'm going to call first my str array, and I'll show you why in a second. And I'm going to set that equal to my input str, and I'm going to do this dot split. So what is split? Split is a way for us to take a string and break it into component pieces based on a delimiter. Okay. If I really had no idea, and I'll just show you really briefly, I had done this search before. If I said, hey, for example, here, I could type something like this into Google. Hey, JavaScript, how to get words out of a string, right? I have this stuff like prepped already. Just by doing a quick search, if I wasn't sure, you can see immediately I come up with something that's coming out of Geeks for Geeks here that says using the split method. And then I could say, well, all right, let me follow up on that, maybe a little more detail. Let me just say, now look for JavaScript, oops, split. And this will bring me to my top choice here on the MDN network to look up the split method. All right, so you can always find these things just by doing a pretty quick search in any of your favorite search engines, like chat bots, AI, whatever it is that you want to use. Just think of a good question to ask. How do I do this in JavaScript? How do I do this with a string? How do I change a string to do whatever? Plug it in there and see what you get. Okay, so I looked this up before. I found this nice string method, or excuse me, yeah, this nice string method, which is called split, and it's going to give me back an array of substrings based on a delimiter. What delimiter do I want? What's the thing that is breaking this string into pieces for me? Well, it's the spaces in between, the single space character. So what I'm going to put inside of here is a string that's containing my delimiter. In this case, it's a single space. Once it does that, this is going to return back to me an array. It's going to be an array of those substrings or an array of those tokens. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is next I'm going to think to myself, well, I know that as I'm doing this, I need to give back a new string. I need to create something new. So if my input is this, Pig Latin is cool, my output needs to be that, another new string. So let me create a placeholder for that, right? As I'm building this new string piece by piece, it might not become apparent right away, but I think as you're working through this, you're going to find this is actually my accumulator pattern again, right? Whether I'm adding up numbers or I'm aggregating a string together, whatever it is, doesn't matter. I'm still accumulating something, right? So I'm going to create a variable to hold my accumulating string. That's going to be my result string. I'm going to call this guy. I know I'm going to be appending stuff into this. So I'm just going to let this be a let, call this new sentence. And we're going to go ahead and start him off as a empty string. So I could choose to not assign this right now. I could just leave it as undefined, but I like doing something like this because that tells maybe other folks who are looking at my code, or maybe my future self when I go back and look at this, it reminds me, listen, I plan on there being a string in here, right? That's the intent of what's going to be inside of this variable, and that can be helpful. So now I have this array of these strings or these tokens that I've pulled out of my input. And I'm going to look at each one of those, right? I'm going to loop over this array. So let me create myself a for loop. I'll put my parens, I'll put my curly braces in there immediately, and then let me go and start filling this in. So how about if we say, and here I'm going to call this my token, what about with a K, token with a K. Each one of those individual tokens I'm pulling out of my new array. In JavaScript, we're going to use a for of in case. If you're somebody like me who does a lot of Python as well, it's easy to get confused between for of and for in and different kinds of loops here. So make sure you're paying close attention. And then what I'm looping over here is my string array. So now inside of here, I'm going to be pulling out each token one at a time out of that array. So what are the couple of things that I might want to look at here? Well, because over here it said leave punctuation marks untouched, and I know that there could be punctuation in here like this. So I'm going to think ahead, and this isn't ideal. I'm not going to make this super, super robust, right? What we're being tested on here, you can look down here, is very straightforward. These aren't fancy sentences, right? There's not a lot of punctuation in the middle of these sentences. There aren't like, different kinds of characters or numbers. This is keeping it very simple for us. I am going to make this a bit more robust than what we need, but I'm not going to go whole hog on it today. Okay, so I'm just trying to pick out some things that I think are going to be helpful to expose you to when it comes to using strings in JavaScript. So what I'm going to do here at this point, what I'm going to say is, let me check if the token that I pull out of here, right? In this case, and you can think of it as a word, like maybe it's this word Latin that I pull out of here, right? I want to test it and see, does it contain only letters, or what we would call alpha characters? Is it only alpha characters? If so, then I'm going to do something. I'm going to manipulate it. I'm going to move that letter and put the AY at the end. But if there's other stuff in there, if there's non-alpha characters in there, I just want to leave it alone. That's what I'm going to do for right now. I know that that'll satisfy this example. If I pull out this token, that token is the single exclamation point. I'm going to say, is that an alpha character? Nope, it's not. Leave it alone, let it be. Right, so this will kind of get me part of the way to a more robust function that I'm writing here. Again, not all the way. It's not going to handle every case, but it's going to be at least a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to say, if this token is alpha, do stuff. Otherwise, leave it alone. Let's start with that. So if, and we'll put this here, this is going to be my if token is alpha, else leave it alone. Let's start with the leave it alone. This is going to be the easier part right here. So what I want to do is, I'm going to say, just take whatever that token is and just add it in to my new sentence, just accumulate it into my new sentence. So what I can put here is I can say new sentence, And I'm just going to use my plus equals and add in my token. Okay. So I'm just going to accumulate that in there. Excuse me, I'm just using a reference to make sure that I'm not losing my place, and I'm not, so that's good. So as I accumulate this in here, and let me be consistent with my semicolons, please. You guys should remind me when I forget. If this is alpha characters, do something. Otherwise, just take that token, leave it alone, and accumulate it into my new sentence. Okay. How am I going to now go back up here and check, is this alpha? Well, what I'm going to utilize here, and this is going to be probably the most interesting part of the string manipulation stuff. I'm going to use something called a regular expression, or a regex, you might have heard them called. Notice over here, there is actually a tag here for a regular expression. So this might give you a hint that it's something that could be useful to you when you're implementing this. Regular expressions are something that are kind of its own can of worms. It can get, for beginners, it can get really complicated really quick. There's a lot to it. However, I just want to give you a little bit of an exposure, just to give you an idea of what's possible, how these things work from sort of a 30,000 foot view. And I highly encourage you to then go and look more deeply into these and put regular expressions into your repertoire. So the way we're going to do it is like this. I'm just going to drop a little bit of code in here. And it's going to look like that. Okay, so first off, these forward slashes and what's between the two forward slashes, that's what's considered our regular expression. So this is just like a bunch of characters, a bunch of special characters in here that are indicators. This is saying stuff like, look at each character in a string and check it to see if it matches something or not. So what's really happening inside of here, that's exactly what this is doing, is it's saying, look at each character, and don't worry too much about the details. Again, we don't have enough time for that today. But it's doing, look at each character and see, is it a lowercase a through z or an uppercase a through z? That's what it's checking. And directly on this regular expression, I can call the test method. I can say dot test. And I pass in, sorry, that shouldn't be the word, that should be my token, right? I'm passing in my token. So what's happening here? You can just kind of think of this, just conceptually is I'm saying, hey, can you please test if my token, the string in here, is all alpha characters? That's what this is doing. We're not getting too deep into the detail of how it's doing that. That's what it's doing. And again, I encourage you to look into regular expressions more deeply when you have the ability to do so. So if my token is indeed all alpha characters, then what do I want to do? Well, I know that there's a couple of different options here, right? I need to do another check. I need to say, well, I know what I got to do is I need to take the first letter of the token, the first letter of the word, and move it on to the end. But I thought of like a special case, a test case. What if it's only single letter? What if it's like, here's a single exclamation point and that's being left out. But what if it was the word or I? Like the sentence is, I have a book, right? When I get that letter I, just the capital letter I, and that's it, I can't say, well, take that and move it to the end. It's only one character, right? So that's going to be one of my exceptions that I'm going to handle here. I'm going to check and see, is this token, is this little substring that I'm dealing with, is it at least 2 characters or more? If it is, then I'll do that moving of the stuff. If it's not, if it's only 1 character, well, again, I think that's another instance where I'm going to say, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not sure. I can't move it. I'll probably still stick the AY on the end of it, but I can't move characters around. So let's come in here and we'll do that. This is going to be another one of those conditionals. We're going to say if this is going to be my, if it's at least 2 characters, if it's 2 characters or more. And then in here, I'm going to say else, oops, not with the capital E. I'm going to say else do something. Okay. So how do I check to see if this is at least 2 characters or it's more than 1 character? Well, here's something cool I can do. I can say, go on my token. And just like strings, that's what this is at this point, it's a string. They have lots of different methods attached to them that I can use to do string manipulation. Guess what? They also have lots of different attributes on them too. One of the attributes is length. I can just directly say token dot length. It's just that easy. So the token dot length, if the token dot length is greater than 1, then I want to do some more manipulation. If it's not, then as I said, I want to leave it alone. So what I'm going to do, leave it alone. Well, so hang on a sec. I want to leave it, but I know what to do. Let me create myself another temporary variable. I'm going to take that temporary variable and I'm going to put something in it. I'm going to assign something in it either based on this condition or this condition. And then afterwards, when I'm done, then I'll take that guy and I'll add it into my sentence. That's a good idea. Let's go into here and we'll say, we'll call this our new string. It's like our new token, our new substring. Let's call it new string, new str, like that. Right? And we don't need to pre-assign anything into here. We can, I'll just leave this one alone for now. I'm going to come into, let's do our simpler one first. I'm going to say, well, if in the case where I'm leaving it alone, I'm going to say new string. I'm going to set that equal to just the token. I didn't do anything to it. I'm leaving it be. There. Now, if it is bigger than 1, if I do want to do that stuff where I move this stuff around, right? There's some cool stuff that I can do here to do that. Let's start myself off. New str, new string is going to be equal to what? Well, let's think through this. Let me look down here. And again, maybe it's just this word Latin. Let's play around with that in our head. What I want to do is I want to say, well, I want to pluck the L off. So then I have just the L. And I have then the remainder, whatever the remainder is, ATIN. I want those 2 things. I want to separate those 2 things. And then I just want to swap their positions and stick them back together again. Right? So let me first say, well, because the part that I want first, that's actually going to be the start of it, is actually going to be the ATIN part of it. Let me see if can I pull that out? That's like a substring that I'm pulling out of that string. Well, sure enough, there's a method called substring. That is exactly what I'm going to take advantage of. I'm going to say token dot substring. Oops, substring. It would be great if I even spelled it right. How about that? Okay. So substring, this method, there's lots of different ways to utilize this. You use this in using indexes. So strings like arrays are indexed starting at 0. So I can say, hey, give me a substring starting at one particular index and ending at another index, and it'll pull it out for me. And there's a few different ways for me to put arguments in here to do that. Something that I can do is if I just put a single argument in there, what that means is start at this position and give me everything up to the end. So if I know that what I want out of this word Latin is the ATIN, well, using indexes, I want to start at the A. What index is that? That's index 1, right? The L is 0, the A is index 1. So I want to start at index 1 and give me everything up to the end. Cool, now I've gotten that part. So this is going to give me the ATIN. Now I want to add on to it. I'm going to use just the regular old plus sign to do concatenation, the L. Well, I can use substring again to get the L out of there. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fish around for yet another method to use, because why not? Let's see what we can find. There is, sure enough, another method where, because I know that I only need a single character out of here, I only want 1 character for sure. There's another method that's character at, or char at, if you prefer. And what I give to this is a single argument indicating the index of the character that I want. In this case, it's the first character, which is at index 0. So what this is doing for me is it saying, give me the substring starting at the second character all the way to the end. This is saying, give me the first character. I'm concatenating those together, but in reverse order, I've swapped them. And now I'm taking this and assigning it into my new string. So based on my conditional here, my new string is either going to be this new fancy guy or just the token without me having done anything to it. Okay, now that I've done that, I've checked on this stuff. I've done the moving, right? The first character move or not. Now that I've finished with that, I'm going to add on the AY. So what I'm going to do here is once I've added on the AY, I know that I'm kind of done with that particular token now, right? That part of the sentence. I'm done with that, and I can add it into, I can accumulate it into my new sentence up here, similar to what I did here. So at this point, I can just say, okay, new sentence plus equals, and I'm going to take my new string and add on, let me be consistent, my AY. Okay, so regardless of whether I've done this manipulation or not, I'm still going to add the AY on there because through this whole part right here, actually up through here, I've determined that this is this substring, this token that I pulled out of my sentence. This is alpha characters. If it wasn't alpha characters at all, then I just said, leave it alone. Don't do anything, just stick it in my new string. Okay, so now that we've done all of this, we now finally need to return back our new sentence. And I need to do that. Oh, let's not get rid of it. We need to do that outside of our loop. Let me collapse this just to make sure that I'm in the right spot here when our loop is done. Return our new sentence. Okay, that looks fair. Now, there might be some other things to do here. I might be forgetting something, but you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. If I run my test here and I go, ooh, boy, what happened there? Chat at, not a font. Oh, I just made a simple syntax error here, didn't I? Misspelling. Chat at, sure enough, you're right. That is not a function. We want char or character at. Let's try it again. So this time it ran, but it didn't pass the test. Let me look and see. Well, if I look here, I look like I'm making the correct new words, sort of, but yeah, I'm missing my spaces. I forgot to put the spaces back in. I have to reinsert those spaces. Well, what I can do over here is I can say, all right, after I've done the manipulation of my tokens that I pulled out of the original string, those original words, let me just tack a space onto the end before I put it into my new sentence, before I accumulate those back in again. So maybe here, right, this is the spot where I'm adding something into my new sentence, and also here as well, these two places. So let's say, all right, after I do this, let me just put a space in there. And maybe I would think, maybe should I do that here too? Maybe I should, just in case, because you never know. Even though at this point, what I've determined here is that what I'm looking at is not alpha. It's something other than an alpha character. What if it's like in the middle of the sentence somewhere? I don't know. I still want to put it back in and I still need a space after it. So I'm going to go ahead and just do my plus sign and concatenate it on a space. Okay, let's give that a shot and see what happens. And ooh, still no dice. But hey, it looks like we're getting closer. We're less wrong because now I have my spaces in between my tokens, my words. But oh, I think I see the problem. Look right there. Now that I've done this, now that I've added in these spaces after each one of the tokens, I have the extra one at the end. Like, oh, crud, I'm always going to end up with that extra space at the end. How do I deal with that? Well, again, there's lots of things that I could do here to accommodate for this. But something that's, just relatively easy that I could do, and also gives me the opportunity to use yet another string method, is I can utilize string methods that have to do with trimming. So it's the idea of trimming white space off of a string. So I can take a string and say trim off all of the white space on both ends. That means space characters, or there could be like tab characters and things like that. Trim it all off, new lines, trim it all off. Or there's ones that are a little more specific and say only trim the beginning or trim the end. So I'm going to give that a shot. So as I have here my new sentence, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to return my new sentence. But before I return it directly on my new sentence, which is a string, I'm going to go ahead and say trim end. Trim the end, meaning trim off any white space off the end. That should get rid of that space. Let's give it a shot. Hey, that did it. Now we're talking. And if I go ahead and attempt this, there's not a whole ton of tests to do in here, but nonetheless, it runs well for us. Okay, so just to recap here, again, what the point here is to just introduce a lot of different types of string manipulations that we can do, a lot of different attributes and methods that are available to us to do string manipulation. So we talked about split up here. The idea that I can access a string's length directly just by looking at the length attribute. We talked about regular expressions. This is something that, again, is a big one, and I encourage you to look more into extremely powerful regular expressions, and they're quite heavily used. We talked about substring, char at or character at. We talked about the trim end and the different kinds of trimming. So I hope this gives you a really good taste of the different kinds of things you can do with strings in JavaScript. Please continue to investigate as much as you can. This is something that you're going to do a lot in your career as a software engineer. And as always, please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you, everyone.